What if the most important phone call of LeBron James' life wasn't about basketball? 3 in the morning. A phone ringing in the locker room after a spectacular victory. On the other end, a desperate voice delivering the news that would change everything. His mother had collapsed and was fighting for her life. But that was just the first revelation of a night that would shatter everything LeBron thought he knew about the woman who raised him. Imagine discovering that the strongest person in your life had been hiding a fatal illness for 8 months. Secretly taking medication, undergoing treatments in silence, all so she wouldn't interrupt your season. What would you do if the doctors told you your mother had only a 30% chance of survival, unless you authorized an experimental procedure with a 40% chance of killing her on the operating table? This is the untold story of how two rival basketball legends, LeBron James and Michael Jordan, joined forces in an impossible mission that transcended anything they had ever achieved on the court. A battle against government bureaucracy, a race against time, and a friendship forged in the most desperate moment of their lives. Because sometimes the greatest victories happen far from the spotlight, and sometimes a 3 a.m. phone call can change not just 2 lives, but thousands of them. Get ready to discover that the true meaning of clutch has nothing to do with buzzer beaters. The locker room at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse buzzed with the euphoria of another Lakers victory on enemy turf. The smell of sweat mixed with deodorant spray lingered in the air conditioning, while damp towels were thrown into corners and bottles of cold water circulated among the players. LeBron James, still wearing the soaked jersey clinging to his muscular chest, smiled broadly as his teammates shouted and clapped, celebrating the 32 points he had scored against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The fluorescent lights in the locker room reflected off the sweat dripping down his forehead, and his brown eyes sparkled with that satisfaction that only a dominant performance could bring. Anthony Davis approached him, slapping his right shoulder hard, while Russell Westbrook yelled something about the decisive play in the third quarter. The sound of cleats against the concrete floor echoed off the white-tiled walls, creating a symphony of victory that LeBron knew as well as the back of his hand. "You destroyed them out there. 32 points in their house, that's insane," shouted Davis, still gasping for air. "That's how we do it, man. Cleveland will always be special to me, but business is business." LeBron's phone vibrated insistently inside his metal locker, cutting through the deafening noise of the celebration. At first he ignored it, thinking it was just another of the hundreds of congratulatory messages he usually received after every game. But the persistent vibrations made him frown and walk over to the locker. His large, calloused hands trembled slightly when he saw the name on the screen. It was Jerome, his childhood neighbor in Akron, someone who never called after games. LeBron's heart instantly raced, and a strange chill ran down his spine as he pressed the green button to answer. The noise in the background faded as if someone had turned down the world's volume, and his hearing sharpened to catch every word from the other side of the line. Jerome never called unless it was something serious, and LeBron had known that since they were just 2 kids running through the streets of Akron, dreaming of a better future. "LeBron, you need to come here now. It's about Gloria, man. She collapsed at home." "What? What are you saying? Where is she now?" The locker room at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse buzzed with the euphoria of another Lakers victory on enemy turf. The smell of sweat mixed with deodorant spray lingered in the air conditioning, while damp towels were thrown into corners and bottles of cold water circulated among the players. LeBron James, still wearing the soaked jersey clinging to his muscular chest, smiled broadly as his teammates shouted and clapped, celebrating the 32 points he had scored against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The fluorescent lights in the locker room reflected off the sweat dripping down his forehead, and his brown eyes sparkled with that satisfaction that only a dominant performance could bring. Anthony Davis approached him, slapping his right shoulder hard, while Russell Westbrook yelled something about the decisive play in the third quarter. The sound of cleats against the concrete floor echoed off the white-tiled walls, creating a symphony of victory that LeBron knew as well as the back of his hand. "You destroyed them out there. 32 points in their house, that's insane," shouted Davis, still gasping for air. "That's how we do it, man. Cleveland will always be special to me, but business is business." LeBron's phone vibrated insistently inside his metal locker, cutting through the deafening noise of the celebration. At first, he ignored it, thinking it was just another of the hundreds of congratulatory messages he usually received after every game. But the persistent vibrations made him frown and walk over to the locker. His large, calloused hands trembled slightly when he saw the name on the screen. It was Jerome, his childhood neighbor in Akron, someone who never called after games. LeBron's heart instantly raced, and a strange chill ran down his spine as he pressed the green button to answer. The noise in the background faded as if someone had turned down the world's volume, and his hearing sharpened to catch every word from the other side of the line. Jerome never called unless it was something serious, and LeBron had known that since they were just two kids running through the streets of Akron, dreaming of a better future. LeBron, you need to come here now. It's about Gloria, man. She collapsed at home. What? What are you saying? Where is she now? Jerome's voice was broken, loaded with an urgency that made LeBron's stomach twist as if he had been punched in the gut. The words came out in quick, fragmented bursts, explaining how he had found Gloria James unconscious on the kitchen floor of her home in Akron, surrounded by scattered groceries as if she had fallen in the middle of a routine chore. Jerome described how he had immediately called emergency services, how the paramedics had worked frantically to stabilize her before transporting her to the Cleveland Clinic, and how everything had happened so quickly that he could barely process the sequence of events. LeBron felt his legs weaken as he absorbed every detail, his hands shaking so much he nearly dropped the phone onto the cold locker room floor. The world around him began to spin imperceptibly, and he leaned against the cold metal wall of the lockers to keep his balance as the sound of his teammates' celebrations turned into a distant, incomprehensible hum. Was she conscious when she got to the hospital? Talk to me, Jerome. How was she? I don't know. She was very pale, and the doctors aren't letting anyone in yet. In a matter of seconds, LeBron transformed from an athlete celebrating a victory into a desperate son facing the worst imaginable nightmare. He ripped the Lakers jersey from his body with brutal force, throwing it to the floor as if it were a useless rag, and began putting on his casual clothes with frantic, uncoordinated movements. His hands trembled so much that he could barely button his jeans, and the Jordan sneakers, worth over $200, were slipped on without even being properly untied. Anthony Davis and Russell Westbrook stopped celebrating when they noticed LeBron's sudden transformation, watching him with growing concern as he moved through the locker room like a man possessed. Coach Frank Vogel approached with a confused expression, trying to understand what had caused such a change in the behavior of his star player. But LeBron was in a state of absolute focus, as if preparing for the most important game of his life. Coach, I need to leave now. My mom is in the hospital, and I need to be there. Of course, LeBron, go. Family always comes first. Whatever you need, just call me. The drive to the Cleveland Clinic turned into a torturous eternity, with LeBron driving his black Mercedes-Benz through the familiar streets of Cleveland as if navigating through a surreal nightmare. The city lights blurred past the windows as he pressed hard on the accelerator, speeding beyond the limit without caring about the consequences. His fingers drummed nervously on the leather steering wheel as his mind raced in all directions, recalling every time Gloria had been his rock, his source of strength when the world seemed to be falling apart around him. She had been both mother and father to him, working multiple jobs to ensure he had food on the table and clothes on his back, sacrificing her own dreams so he could chase his. Tears began to blur his vision as he remembered how she had saved every penny to buy his first decent basketball shoes, how she had driven for hours to take him to practices and games, how she had cried with pride the first time he appeared on national television. Please, God, don't take her from me now. She's everything I have, everything I've ever had. I promised I'd take care of her forever, that she'd never want for anything again. I can't lose her like this. The Cleveland Clinic loomed before him like a white and imposing fortress, its lit windows cutting through the night's darkness like small beacons of hope and despair. LeBron parked the car haphazardly in the emergency area, abandoning the vehicle with the keys still in the ignition as he ran toward the automatic glass doors. His Jordan sneakers squeaked against the hospital's polished floor as he sprinted through the hallways, following the signs pointing to the cardiac intensive care unit. The hospital's characteristic smell, a mix of disinfectant, medication, and human fear, invaded his nostrils, making his stomach churn again. Nurses and doctors moved out of his way, instantly recognizing the 6'9" man who dominated sports headlines. But LeBron was completely oblivious to the attention his presence caused. All that mattered was getting to his mother, seeing her with his own eyes, holding her hand, and assuring her that he was there. "I'm LeBron James. I'm looking for Gloria James. She was brought in a little while ago." "Mr. James, she's in the intensive care unit. Dr. Patterson is waiting to speak with you." Dr. Patterson was a middle-aged man with graying hair and deep blue eyes that reflected decades of experience in emergency medicine. He wore the traditional white coat over a light blue shirt, and there was a gravity in his posture that immediately put LeBron on high alert. As he approached LeBron in the ICU hallway, their facial expressions communicated the seriousness of the situation before any words were spoken. LeBron felt his legs grow heavy as lead as he prepared to hear news that could change his life forever. The corridor around them was silent, except for the constant sound of heart monitors and mechanical ventilators echoing through the closed doors of the rooms. The hospital's fluorescent lights seemed brighter and colder than usual, creating a clinical atmosphere that sharply contrasted with the emotional heat burning in LeBron's chest. "Mr. James, your mother suffered a severe cardiac collapse. We managed to stabilize her, but the situation is still critical." "Is she going to be okay? Please, doctor, tell me she's going to be okay." When LeBron finally saw Gloria through the ICU room window, his heart shattered into a million pieces. The woman who had been his fortress all his life now lay unconscious in a hospital bed, connected to a complex network of tubes, wires, and monitors that blinked and beeped constantly. Her skin, normally radiant and full of life, now looked pale and fragile like tissue paper, and her breathing was assisted by a machine that rose and fell in a mechanical, hypnotic rhythm. LeBron pressed the palm of his hand against the cold window glass, desperately wishing he could break through it and hold his mother's hand, whispering in her ear that he was there and everything would be all right. The tears he had tried to hold back throughout the drive to the hospital finally began to stream down his cheeks, leaving hot, salty trails he didn't even bother to wipe away. This man who had faced the greatest pressures in the world of professional sports, who had played in NBA finals before millions of spectators without showing nerves, now felt completely vulnerable and powerless in the face of his mother's fragility. "Can I go in and stay with her? She needs to know I'm here." "Of course, Mr. James, just keep your voice low and try not to touch the equipment." LeBron approached Gloria's bed with cautious steps, as if walking on sacred ground. He sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair next to the bed, designed more for functionality than comfort, and gently took his mother's hand between his. Her skin was cold, and her hand seemed small and fragile compared to his huge, calloused basketball palms. LeBron began speaking softly, telling her about the game he had just won, about how well the Lakers were playing this season, about the plans he had for summer vacation, anything to fill the terrible silence of the room and keep hope alive that she might somehow hear him. The heart monitor next to the bed emitted steady, comforting beeps, each sound representing a beat of Gloria's heart, a proof that she was still fighting. LeBron closed his eyes and tried to remember the prayers Gloria had taught him as a child, words he hadn't spoken in years, but now returned to his memory with crystal clarity. "Mom, you have to wake up. I need you. I've always needed you. And that hasn't changed just because I grew up. You promised me you'd always be here for me, remember? You can't break that promise now." It was then that Dr. Patterson returned to the room with an even graver expression than before, carrying a folder of documents that he held with both hands as if it were something of extreme importance. He gestured for LeBron to follow him into the hallway, where they could talk without disturbing the delicate environment of the intensive care unit. LeBron reluctantly let go of Gloria's hand and stood up from the chair, his muscles protesting against the movement after having been in the same position for almost an hour. The hallway was quieter now, with only the distant sound of monitors and the occasional echo of nurses' footsteps making their night rounds. The lights had been dim for the night shift, creating a softer but also darker atmosphere that perfectly matched the weight of the conversation about to happen. "Mr. James, we found something in your mother's test that's very concerning. She's known she was sick for some time." "What do you mean by that? What kind of thing did she know?" Dr. Patterson opened the folder and showed LeBron a series of medical documents and test results that had been found in Gloria's bag when she was brought to the hospital. The papers revealed a secret medical history she had carefully hidden from her son for months, including regular cardiology appointments, prescriptions for heart medications, and test results indicating a progressive degenerative heart condition. LeBron felt his head spin as he absorbed the information that his mother had been undergoing intensive medical treatment without ever mentioning a single word about her condition. The sense of betrayal he felt wasn't directed at the doctor or the hospital, but at Gloria herself, who had chosen to carry this burden alone instead of sharing it with the son who would have moved mountains to help her. Tears welled up in his eyes again as he held the documents with trembling hands, each page revealing more details about the silent battle his mother had been fighting in the shadows. There are medications at home indicating she's been treating this for months, hidden from all of us. We need to talk to her when she wakes up, but at that exact moment, as if the universe were conspiring to create the most terrifying moment possible, the cardiac monitor in Gloria's room blared a loud and piercing alarm that echoed through the hospital hallways like a cry for help. The sound was deafening and urgent, a code red that made anyone's heart leap into their throat. LeBron dropped the medical documents on the floor and ran back to the room, followed closely by Dr. Patterson and a team of nurses who seemed to appear out of nowhere. The room that had been quiet and peaceful just moments before was now buzzing with frantic activity, with medical professionals moving around Gloria's bed with precision and urgency. LeBron was gently but firmly pushed away from the bed as the medical team worked, and he found himself pressed against the room's wall, watching helplessly as they fought to save the life of the one person who had always been by his side, no matter what. "What's happening? Someone tell me what's happening to her." "Mr. James, please, let us work. We're going to do everything we can." Morning arrived at the Cleveland Clinic like a gray mist seeping through the windows of the intensive care unit, bringing with it a pale and cold light that contrasted with the suffocating heat of anxiety that had taken over Gloria James' room. LeBron had spent the entire night sitting in the same uncomfortable plastic chair, his eyes red and swollen, fixed on the serene face of his mother, watching every subtle movement of her breathing, assisted by the machines. The nurses had tried to convince him to go home and rest, offering blankets and pillows, but he had politely refused every offer, unable to leave even for a moment. The coffee someone had brought him remained untouched on the table beside him, cold for hours, as he maintained a silent and determined vigil. His large, callous fingers delicately held Gloria's hand, as if the touch could somehow transmit his life force to her, keeping her anchored to this world through the physical connection they had always shared. The rhythmic sound of the cardiac monitors had become a hypnotic soundtrack for his fragmented thoughts, each beep representing a small victory against the uncertainty that hovered over them like a storm cloud. "Mom, I know you can hear me in there somewhere. You've always been stronger than any of us. Please, just open your eyes for me. We still have so much to talk about." It was around 8 o'clock in the morning when the first rays of sunlight finally managed to pierce through the thick clouds covering Cleveland, that Gloria began to show the first signs of consciousness. Her fingers moved almost imperceptibly within LeBron's hand, a movement so subtle that he initially thought he had imagined it. But then her eyes began moving rapidly beneath her closed eyelids, as if she were struggling to emerge from a deep, disturbing dream. LeBron immediately leaned forward, his heart racing with a mixture of hope and terror, closely watching every small sign that his mother was coming back to him. The machines around the bed began registering subtle changes in Gloria's vital signs, and a nurse passing through the hallway noticed the alterations on the monitors and quickly approached to assess the situation. Dr. Patterson was called immediately, and within minutes the room was once again filled with medical professionals, checking reflexes, adjusting medications, and carefully monitoring every indication that Gloria was returning to consciousness. "Doctor, is she waking up? Is she going to be okay now?" "We'll observe carefully, Mr. James. This is a good sign, but we still need to be cautious." When Gloria finally opened her eyes, it was as if a switch had been flipped, illuminating not just her face, but the entire room with an energy that had been absent during the long hours of the night. She blinked several times, trying to focus her vision on the hospital environment surrounding her. And when her eyes finally found LeBron's face, A solitary tear rolled down her still pale, but now visibly more animated cheek. LeBron gripped her hand more firmly, leaning in to gently kiss her forehead as he whispered words of relief and love that had been trapped in his throat all night. Gloria tried to speak, but her voice came out as a hoarse whisper due to the tubes that had been in her throat. So she simply squeezed her son's hand, communicating through touch everything that words couldn't express at that moment. Dr. Patterson approached the bed with an expression of cautious optimism, checking Gloria's vital signs and asking basic questions to assess her neurological state, while LeBron watched every movement with the intensity of someone who had almost lost the most precious thing in his life. "Son, are you okay? You look exhausted. How long have I been—" "Mom, I'm fine. You're the one I'm worried about. Why didn't you tell me you were sick?" After Dr. Patterson and the medical team left the room to give the family some privacy, Gloria asked LeBron to come closer to the bed, her voice still weak but filled with a determination he had recognized since childhood. She knew the time had come to tell the truth, to reveal the secret she had carried alone for 8 long months, protecting him from a reality she thought could destroy everything they had fought for. With eyes full of tears and a voice trembling with emotion, Gloria began to recount the day she received the diagnosis of a rare cardiomyopathy, a condition the cardiologist had explained as progressive and potentially fatal if not properly treated. She described how she had sat alone in the doctor's office, absorbing the devastating information while immediately thinking about the impact it would have on LeBron's season, on his commitments with the Lakers, on his responsibility to millions of fans who depended on him for inspiration. LeBron listened to every word with an expression of growing shock, realizing that while he had been focused on winning games and breaking records, his mother had been facing the biggest battle of her life completely alone. "Son, I found out 8 months ago that my heart is sick. It's a rare condition, and the doctors said it needs constant treatment. Mom, why didn't you tell me? We've always faced everything together. Why was this time different?" Gloria held LeBron's hands with all the strength she could muster, her eyes shining with a mix of maternal love and deep guilt that had been consuming her soul for months. She explained how she had consulted various specialists in secret, scheduling appointments at times she knew LeBron would be training or playing, always paying out of pocket to ensure that no medical record would reach him or anyone close to the family. She had a small pharmacy hidden in her closet, expensive medications she took religiously every day, strictly following the medical prescriptions while pretending to the entire world that she was perfectly healthy. Gloria described the nights she lay awake feeling chest pains, silently taking her meds and praying that the condition wouldn't worsen before LeBron's season ended. She had planned to tell him everything after the playoffs, when he would have time to process the information without the added pressure of having to perform in the year's most important games. The sacrifice had been immense, but for Gloria, protecting her son's focus and concentration was more important than her own need for emotional support. "I didn't want to disrupt your season, son. You've worked so hard to get where you are. How could I throw my problems on you now? I scheduled all the appointments on your game or practice days. No one ever knew anything. I didn't want to be a burden to you." Tears began to stream down LeBron's face as he absorbed the magnitude of the sacrifice his mother had made, once again putting his needs above her own. He remembered all the times in recent months when he had asked how she was doing, and she had responded with a bright smile and an evasive answer about being fine, busy with her charity projects, or simply enjoying life. Now he realized that every smile had been a carefully constructed mask, every positive response a compassionate lie meant to protect him from a truth she thought could destroy his focus and performance. LeBron felt an overwhelming mix of love, anger, and guilt. Love for his mother's unconditional dedication, anger that she had faced this alone, and guilt for not noticing the signs that were certainly there if he had just paid more attention. He remembered specific moments when she had seemed more tired than usual, times when she had declined invitations to events or trips, saying she preferred to stay home and rest. And now it all made painful, crystal clear sense. "Mom, do you remember when I was a kid and you told me that a family's a team? That we face everything together, always? How could you think I wouldn't want to be by your side in this? You're more important than any game, any season, anything. Gloria closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength for the hardest part of her confession. When she opened them again, there was a raw vulnerability in her gaze that LeBron had never seen before, as if she were stripping away all the layers of protection she had built over the years to be the strong, unshakable mother he needed. With a voice breaking with emotion, she revealed her deepest fears, explaining how she had spent entire nights imagining scenarios where LeBron would find out about her condition and immediately abandon basketball to care for her full-time. She knew her son better than anyone in the world, knew the intensity of his love and loyalty, and was terrified at the possibility that he would sacrifice everything he had worked for to become her personal caregiver. Gloria had seen how he had reacted when other close family members faced health problems, how he had dropped everything to be present, and she simply couldn't bear the idea of being responsible for interrupting the extraordinary career they had built together through so much sacrifice and dedication. "Son, I was so afraid you'd give everything up to take care of me. You've always done that, always put family above everything. I would never forgive myself if I were responsible for destroying your dreams. These dreams have always been our dreams, and I couldn't be the one to end them." LeBron stood up from the chair and leaned over the hospital bed, hugging his mother as gently as the situation allowed, feeling as if he were holding not just the woman who gave him life, but all his history, all his memories, all the moments that defined them as a family. He cried openly for the first time since he had received Jerome's call, tears of pain, relief, love, and a deep sadness for the solitary journey Gloria had endured over the past 8 months. Between sobs, he began to speak about all the times he had felt something was different, all the moments when his instincts had told him there was something she wasn't sharing, but that he had ignored because he implicitly trusted her word. He spoke about how basketball, as important as it was to him, would never be more important than her health and happiness, about how he would have reorganized his entire life without hesitation if he had known the truth. LeBron promised that from that moment on, they would face everything together, as they always should have, and that he would never again allow her to carry any burden alone, no matter how well-intentioned her motivations were. "Mom, you taught me that we're stronger together. Why did you forget your own lesson when you needed it the most? I promise we'll face this the right way together. No matter what happens with my career, you come first, always." As LeBron held Gloria's hand firmly and repeated his promises to stand by her through whatever the future brought, he began to notice subtle changes on the monitors around the bed that made him frown with growing concern. The numbers on the screen, which he had learned to interpret during the long night, began to show irregularities that hadn't been there moments before, and the rhythm of the heartbeats seemed to be becoming less consistent, alternating between normal patterns and sequences that clearly indicated stress in Gloria's cardiovascular system. She also seemed to be sensing the changes, her breathing becoming slightly more labored, and there was an expression in her eyes suggesting that she felt something happening in her body beyond her control. LeBron squeezed her hand more tightly, trying to transmit his own life force to her through the touch, while nervously watching the numbers continue to fluctuate alarmingly. Gloria looked him directly in the eyes, and he could see that she was gathering energy for something important, as if she knew time was running out, and there was something crucial she needed to say before it was too late. "Son, I love you more than you'll ever know. You've been the greatest joy of my life, the reason I got up every morning for 40 years. But if something happens to me, I need you to promise that you'll keep living, that you'll keep being the extraordinary man I raised." For help, his voice echoing through the hospital hallways with an intensity that made nurses and doctors run from all directions. Dr. Patterson appeared at the door of the room within seconds, followed by a team of medical professionals who moved around the bed with the precision and urgency of people who had faced similar situations thousands of times. But for LeBron, every second felt like an eternity as he was gently but firmly pushed away from the bed. The heart monitors had become a cacophony of alarms and alerts, creating a terrifying soundtrack that pierced his soul as he watched the doctors work frantically to stabilize Gloria, who had slipped into a deep coma so quickly it seemed impossible. "She's going into cardiac arrest. Prepare the defibrillator immediately. Mr. James, please leave the room now. We'll do everything we can, but we need space to work." It was 3 in the morning when LeBron finally found himself alone in the silent hallway of the Cleveland Clinic, after the doctors had managed to stabilize Gloria in critical condition, and she had been transferred to an even more specialized intensive care unit. His hands trembled uncontrollably as he held his phone, staring at the illuminated screen that reflected his exhausted face, marked by the tears that hadn't stopped streaming since he had witnessed his mother going into cardiac arrest. The hallway was immersed in an almost sepulchral stillness, broken only by the distant hum of medical devices and the occasional echo of nurses' footsteps making their night rounds. LeBron knew he needed to talk to someone, to vent to a person who could understand not only the weight of fame and expectations, but also the deep pain of seeing a loved one fighting for their life. There was only one name that kept coming to his mind, a person who had faced devastating family tragedies under the relentless spotlight of the sports media, and who might offer not just understanding, but also the wisdom that comes from having survived life's worst moments. I need to talk to someone who understands what it's like to carry the weight of the world on your shoulders and still face the pain of losing the one you love the most. Michael has always known how to handle the toughest situations. If anyone can help me now, it's him. With his fingers still trembling, LeBron dialed the number he had stored on his phone for years, since the early meetings they had when he was just a promising young player entering the NBA. The phone rang once, twice, and for a moment LeBron feared that Michael Jordan wouldn't answer such a late-night call. But on the third ring, the familiar and comforting voice of the man many considered the greatest basketball player of all time echoed through the phone line. There was immediate concern in Jordan's voice, who, even at 62, maintained the same intensity and attention to detail that had made him a legend, and he immediately realized that something was terribly wrong by the desperate tone in LeBron's voice. Without hesitation, Jordan sat up in bed at his luxurious mansion in Charlotte, North Carolina, fully awake and focused, preparing to listen and offer whatever support was within his reach. The connection between the two men transcended rivalries or comparisons. At that moment, they were simply two human beings, one of them desperately needing support, and the other ready to offer all the help possible. LeBron? It's 3 in the morning. What's going on? Are you okay? Michael, I need you. My mom is dying, and I don't know what to do. I've never felt so lost in my life. The words came out of LeBron in an uncontrollable emotional torrent, each sentence broken by sobs he could no longer contain. He told Jordan about Gloria's sudden collapse, about the devastating discovery that she had hidden her heart condition for 8 months, about the terrifying moments in the hospital when the monitors sounded alarms and she went into cardiac arrest right before his eyes. Jordan listened to every word in respectful silence, occasionally making sounds of understanding and empathy, allowing LeBron to unload all the accumulated anguish without interruptions or judgments. Through the phone line, Jordan could feel not only LeBron's pain, but also the deep guilt that was consuming him for not having noticed the signs of his mother's illness, for having been so focused on his career that he had missed the clues that were surely there. LeBron's voice completely broke when he described the moment when Gloria confessed that she had hidden everything so as not to interfere with his season, and Jordan felt a familiar pang of pain in his chest, remembering his own moments of family vulnerability under public scrutiny. She suffered alone for 8 months, Michael. 8 months. And I didn't notice anything. What kind of son am I? She said she didn't want to be a burden to me, that she was afraid I'd give everything up to take care of her. As if she could ever be a burden. Jordan stood up from bed and walked to the window of his room, looking out at the night landscape of Charlotte while carefully choosing his words. At 62, he had learned that moments like this required not only compassion, but also the wisdom that comes from having faced his own devastating family tragedies. Without hesitation, he offered any financial help LeBron might need, mentioning that he could arrange for the best cardiac specialists in the world, experimental treatments at private clinics, or any medical resource that could make a difference in Gloria's treatment. But LeBron gently interrupted, explaining that money wasn't the problem. The Lakers and his own financial resources ensured that Gloria had access to the best medical care available. What he really needed was something much simpler and at the same time infinitely more valuable. The presence of a friend who understood the unique loneliness that comes with fame, the weight of public expectations, and the universal human pain of seeing a loved one fighting for their life. Jordan understood immediately, remembering moments in his own life when money and success couldn't fill the void left by loss and pain. LeBron, whatever you need, the best doctors, experimental treatments, any financial resource, you know it's available. No, Michael, thank you, but it's not about money. I just need a friend right now, someone who understands what this is. It was then that Jordan began to share his own painful memories, speaking for the first time in years about the devastating death of his father, James R. Jordan Sr., who had been murdered in 1993 at the height of his career with the Chicago Bulls. His voice became softer and more reflective as he described how that tragedy had shaken not only his personal life, but also his perspective on basketball, success, and what truly mattered in life. Jordan told LeBron about the sleepless nights he had spent questioning whether he should keep playing, about the guilt he felt for constantly traveling while his family dealt with the pain at home, about how he had felt completely lost and vulnerable despite all his fame and fortune. He described the moments when he had considered walking away from basketball completely, feeling like he could no longer find joy or purpose in the sport that had defined his identity since his teenage years. The connection between the two men deepened through this shared vulnerability, creating a bond that transcended any sports rivalry or career comparison. When my father died in '93, I thought my world had ended. I couldn't understand how to keep playing when he wouldn't be there to see me. For months I felt lost, questioning everything. Basketball seemed meaningless without him in the stands cheering for me. Jordan then began to talk about his mother, Dolores Jordan, and how she had become the stabilizing force that kept the family together during those dark months after James Sr.'s death. With deep admiration in his voice, he described how Dolores had demonstrated an almost superhuman inner strength, organizing the funeral, handling the practical details of family life, and at the same time providing emotional support for Jordan and his siblings when they could barely function. She was the one who reminded all of them of the words James Sr. always repeated: "You have to take something negative and turn it into a positive," a philosophy of life that had defined not only Jordan's approach to basketball, but also his way of dealing with adversity. Jordan explained how his mother had taught him that honoring his father's memory meant continuing to pursue excellence, continuing to be the man that James Sr. had raised, and using the pain as fuel for something greater and more meaningful. That lesson had been fundamental for Jordan to find the motivation to return to the court and eventually win 3 more NBA championships. My mom, Dolores, was the one who kept us standing during those darkest days. She had a strength I'd never seen before. She always reminded us of my dad's words: "Take something negative and turn it into a positive." That phrase saved me. As the conversation continued through the night, Jordan made a decision that even surprised himself. He looked at the clock on his bedside table and realized that in just a few hours, the sun would rise, marking a new day that could bring definitive news about Gloria's condition. Without hesitation, he told LeBron that he would take his private jet as soon as dawn broke and fly directly to Cleveland. Not because LeBron had asked, but because he recognized a moment in life when being physically present was more important than any professional or personal commitment he might have. Jordan explained that he had learned through his own experiences that certain moments require physical presence, not just emotional support from a distance, and that this was clearly one of those moments. He instructed LeBron to try to get at least a few hours of rest, to eat something even if he had no appetite, and to remember that Gloria had fought for 8 months precisely because she was a strong and determined woman. The prospect of having Jordan by his side brought LeBron the first moment of genuine relief since he had received Jerome's call, knowing that he would have the support of someone who truly understood the unique complexity of his circumstances. "LeBron, I'm going to take my jet as soon as the sun comes up. You shouldn't be going through this alone. Try to get some rest. Your mom will need you strong when she wakes up, and she will wake up." While LeBron finally managed to nap for a few hours in an uncomfortable chair in the ICU waiting room, Jordan was on his private jet flying through the morning sky toward Cleveland, using the flight time to extensively research rare cardiomyopathy and available experimental treatments. He had discreetly contacted some of the best cardiologists in the country during the flight, using his influence and connections to gather information that might not be readily available to the family. Jordan discovered details about an experimental treatment being developed at a specialized clinic, a risky but potentially groundbreaking procedure that could offer hope where conventional treatments had failed. However, the information he gathered also revealed concerning aspects about Gloria's specific condition that the Cleveland Clinic doctors might not yet have fully communicated to LeBron. The intensive research during the flight left Jordan with a mix of cautious hope and deep concern, knowing that he would have to share both the positive possibilities and the potential risks with his friend. I need to find out all the options available for Gloria. LeBron deserves to know about every possibility, every hope. These experimental treatments may be risky, but they might be her only real chance. When Jordan arrived at the Cleveland Clinic around 10 in the morning, he found LeBron exactly where he expected, sitting in the same waiting room, wearing the same clothes from the night before, with red eyes and a face marked by emotional and physical exhaustion. The two men embraced without words, a hug that communicated years of mutual respect, shared understanding, and now unconditional support during one of the most difficult moments of LeBron's life. Jordan had brought fresh coffee and some sandwiches, gently forcing LeBron to eat something as they talked about what had happened during the early morning hours. The doctors had managed to stabilize Gloria, but her condition remained critical, and there was still no certainty about when she might regain consciousness or what her long-term prognosis would be. Jordan carefully observed LeBron's face as he absorbed this information, recognizing the signs of a man forcing himself to maintain composure when everything inside him was falling apart. He knew it was time to share the information he had gathered during the flight, information that could completely change the perspective on the treatment options available for Gloria. LeBron, I researched your mom's condition the entire flight. I contacted some of the best cardiologists in the country. There's something the doctors here may not have told you yet. There's an experimental treatment, but it's complicated. Jordan leaned forward in his chair, his expression becoming more serious as he prepared to reveal information that could be both a source of hope and of additional concern. He explained that he had discovered an experimental treatment program being conducted by a team of pioneering cardiologists, developing a new approach for rare cardiomyopathy cases like Gloria's. The treatment involved a combination of gene therapy, state-of-the-art medical devices, and a medication protocol that was still in clinical trial phases, but had shown promising results in patients with similar conditions. However, Jordan visibly hesitated before continuing, knowing that the next information he shared would be both a blessing and a curse for LeBron. The experimental treatment was not only risky, with a success rate still being determined, but also required the patient to undergo procedures that could be more dangerous than the original condition if something went wrong during the process. The treatment exists, LeBron, and it may be exactly what your mom needs, but I'm not going to lie to you. It's very risky. Very risky. If something goes wrong during the procedure, the consequences could be irreversible. The Cleveland Clinic's medical library had been transformed into an improvised command center where LeBron and Michael Jordan spent the next 6 hours immersed in intensive research, surrounded by piles of medical articles, clinical study reports, and handwritten notes covering every surface of the dark wooden table. Jordan had used his connections to organize video conferences with renowned cardiologists from different continents, turning the library's computers into windows to medical offices in Boston, London, Zurich, and Berlin. LeBron absorbed every technical word with the intensity of someone studying for the most important exam of his life, asking detailed questions about success rates, side effects, and alternative procedures, while Jordan took meticulous notes and organized the information so they could make an informed decision. The silent environment of the library dramatically contrasted with the emotional urgency hanging in the air, creating a surreal atmosphere where two of the greatest athletes in history pored over medical literature as if they were medical students preparing for a final exam. The hours passed without them noticing, completely absorbed in the search for a solution that could save Gloria's life without putting her at even greater risk. Michael, this Berlin study shows impressive results. 80% complete cure in cases similar to my mom's. But look here, LeBron. The mortality rate during the procedure is 40%. That means 4 out of 10 patients don't survive the surgery. It was during a video conference with Dr. Klaus Weber, a German cardiologist pioneering experimental treatments for rare cardiomyopathy, that they obtained the most detailed and at the same time most terrifying information about the treatment option Jordan had discovered during the flight. Dr. Weber, a 60-year-old man with decades of experience in experimental cardiovascular procedures, explained through the computer screen that the treatment developed at his clinic in Munich represented the cutting edge of cardiac medicine, combining targeted gene therapy, implantation of microscopic biomechanical devices, and a medication protocol tested in only 50 patients over the past 3 years. His voice carried both hope and caution as he described how the procedure worked at the cellular level, literally reprogramming defective heart cells and replacing damaged tissue with biosynthetic material that permanently integrated with the patient's heart. LeBron felt his heart race as he heard about the possibility of complete cure, but at the same time a chill ran down his spine when Dr. Weber began explaining the risks involved in the revolutionary procedure. "Mr. James, this treatment can completely cure your mother's condition. The patients who survive the procedure live with functionally normal hearts for the rest of their lives. However, I must be completely honest with you. 40% of patients do not survive the surgery. It's a significant risk that I cannot minimize." Dr. Patterson, who had joined the video conference at LeBron's request, then presented the devastating statistics about Gloria's prognosis without any experimental intervention. His voice was calm but filled with medical gravity as he explained that, based on the latest tests in the rapid progression of Gloria's cardiomyopathy, she had only a 30% chance of surviving the next 6 months with conventional treatments. The available medications could slow the deterioration, but could not reverse the damage already done to the heart muscle, and Gloria's specific condition was known for its unpredictable and often fatal progression. LeBron felt as if he were being forced to choose between two different versions of a nightmare: watching his mother slowly deteriorate over months with little hope of recovery, or submitting her to a procedure that could instantly kill her on the operating table. Jordan silently watched the internal conflict unfolding on LeBron's face, recognizing the agony of having to make a decision that would determine the fate of the most important person in his life. The cruel mathematics of medicine had reduced Gloria's future to percentages and probabilities that seemed to insult the complexity of an entire human life. So basically, we're talking about a 30% chance she'll survive without the surgery versus a 60% chance of complete cure if she survives the procedure. Dr. Patterson, that means any choice I make could result in my mother's death. How does anyone make a decision like that? Over the following hours, LeBron and Jordan alternated between moments of intense discussion about the technical aspects of the treatment and contemplative silences where each grappled with their own reflections on life, death, and the responsibilities that come with the power to make decisions that affect the fate of others. Jordan shared stories about difficult decisions he had faced during his career, moments when he had to choose between safety and risk, between the known and the unknown, always recalling his father's words about turning negative situations into positives. He explained to LeBron that some of the greatest victories of his life had come from moments when he had chosen the riskier path, when he had decided to bet on possibilities instead of accepting limitations. However, Jordan also acknowledged that this decision was fundamentally different from anything he had faced on the basketball court, because the price of failure would not just be a game loss, but potentially the life of the woman who had raised LeBron and shaped him into the man he had become. The pressure of this choice was unlike anything either of the two men had ever experienced, even in the most crucial moments of their sports careers. "LeBron, I learned that sometimes you have to bet everything when normal circumstances offer no real hope. But this isn't a decision I can make for you. This choice will define how you live with the consequences for the rest of your life." When Dr. Weber offered to bring his specialized medical team to Cleveland within 48 hours if LeBron decided to proceed with the experimental treatment, the reality of the situation became even more tangible and frightening. LeBron imagined his mother being taken into an operating room where German doctors he had never met would work on her heart for hours, using techniques that had only been tested on a few dozen people worldwide. He thought about Gloria waking from her unconsciousness, only to find out she was about to undergo the riskiest medical procedure of her life, and wondered if she would make the same choice he was considering. Jordan gently reminded him that Gloria had spent 8 months making medical decisions alone, choosing to hide her condition to protect LeBron from exactly this kind of pressure and responsibility. Now the situation had completely reversed, and LeBron found himself in the position of having to make a decision that could save or end his mother's life, carrying the weight of a choice she had desperately tried to prevent him from having to make. Dr. Weber, if I authorize this procedure, how long will it take for your team and equipment to get to Cleveland? We can be there in 48 hours, Mr. James, but you must understand, once we begin, there's no turning back. The afternoon had turned into night when LeBron finally made his decision. After hours of internal struggle that left him mentally and emotionally exhausted, he looked at Jordan, who had stayed by his side through the entire process without ever trying to influence his choice, offering only support and perspective when asked. With a voice that trembled slightly but carried absolute determination, LeBron authorized the experimental procedure, explaining that he couldn't live with the idea of watching his mother slowly deteriorate when there was a real chance for a complete cure. He knew he was gambling Gloria's life on a statistical possibility, but he also recognized that without the experimental treatment, she was effectively condemned to a slow and painful death. Jordan hugged LeBron tightly when the decision was communicated to Dr. Weber, whispering words of support and assuring him that regardless of the outcome, LeBron had made the only courageous choice available in the impossible circumstances they faced. The German medical team was immediately mobilized, and preparations for the riskiest procedure of Gloria's life began with an efficiency that was simultaneously impressive and terrifying. I can't let her die slowly when there's a chance to save her completely, even if it's risky. Dr. Weber, I authorize the procedure. Bring your team to Cleveland as soon as possible. The following 48 hours passed like an eternity of intensive medical preparation, during which the Cleveland Clinic was transformed into an experimental surgical center equipped with medical technology transported directly from Munich. Jordan never left LeBron's side, organizing meals, handling the media that had begun to gather outside the hospital, and providing the kind of practical and emotional support that only a true friend could offer. Gloria remained unconscious throughout the preparation period, connected to machines that monitored every aspect of her vital functions, while the German medical team conducted additional tests and finalized surgical protocols. LeBron spent hours sitting beside his mother's bed, talking to her about childhood memories, plans for the future, about how she had been the most constant and positive force in his life, secretly hoping that somehow his words could reach her through the unconsciousness and give her strength for the battle ahead. The atmosphere in the hospital was tense and filled with anticipation, with nurses and doctors moving with the choreographed precision of professionals who knew they were about to participate in a procedure that could make medical history or result in tragedy. Mom, in a few hours you'll undergo the most important surgery of your life. I need you to fight like you've never fought before. We both bet everything on this. Now's not the time to give up. On the morning of the third day, when the German medical team finally declared that all preparations had been completed and Gloria was in ideal condition for the experimental procedure, LeBron felt an overwhelming mix of terror and determination that temporarily left him speechless. Jordan stood by his side as Gloria was taken to the specially prepared operating room, holding firmly onto LeBron's arm as they watched the woman who had dedicated her entire life to raising a champion disappear through the double doors that closed with a definitive, final sound. Dr. Weber had explained that the procedure would take between 10 and 14 hours, depending on complications that might arise during the surgery, and that they would receive updates every 2 hours on the progress of the treatment. LeBron sat in the surgical waiting room with Jordan beside him, both knowing that the next hours would determine not only Gloria's fate, but also LeBron's future as a person, as a son, and as someone who had bet everything on a statistical chance to save the life of the most important woman in the world to him. Whatever the outcome, LeBron, you made the right choice. You gave her the best possible chance. Now all we can do is wait and have faith that she's strong enough to get through this. 12 hours later, when LeBron was beginning to wonder if something had gone terribly wrong due to the prolonged duration of the surgery, the doors of the operating room finally opened and Dr. Weber emerged, slowly removing his surgical mask as he walked toward where LeBron and Jordan had maintained their silent vigil. His expression was completely unreadable, a professional mask that revealed neither hope nor despair, creating a moment of suspense that seemed to stretch into eternity as he approached the two men who had bet everything on the success of his medical skills. LeBron instinctively stood up, his legs weak after 12 hours sitting in the same chair, while Jordan remained by his side, offering physical support if needed. The corridor around them was silent except for the sound of Dr. Weber's footsteps on the waxed floor, each step echoing like a heartbeat that could bring life or death. The moment had arrived when they would find out whether the riskiest gamble of LeBron's life had saved or cost the life of the woman who had raised him to be a champion. "Dr. Weber, please tell me how she is. I need to know now." 12-hour, is that normal? Did something go wrong during the surgery? Senator Richard Hawkins' office in Washington, D.C. was an intimidating space, with its dark, mahogany-paneled walls, portraits of historic presidents, and bookshelves filled with volumes of legislation that seemed to bear witness to decades of political decisions that shaped the fate of millions of Americans. LeBron James and Michael Jordan sat in worn leather armchairs across from the senator's imposing desk, 2 months after the medical miracle that had saved Gloria James' life and completely transformed their perspectives on the American healthcare system. Gloria's recovery had been nothing short of extraordinary. The German experimental treatment had worked exactly as Dr. Weber had promised, restoring her heart to a state of normal functionality and completely eliminating the cardiomyopathy symptoms that had threatened her life. But it was precisely this miraculous recovery that had inspired Gloria to make a request that changed the course of LeBron and Jordan's lives. When she held her son's hands and said with a determination he had recognized since childhood, "Son, now that I'm okay, we need to help other families who weren't as lucky as we were." Those words had echoed in LeBron's mind for weeks, leading him to contact Jordan and propose a mission that transcended anything they had accomplished on the basketball court. "Senator Hawkins, we're not here as celebrities asking for favors. We're here as American citizens fighting for a cause that could save thousands of lives. This experimental treatment saved my mother, but how many more people will die while we wait for bureaucracy to decide whether it's worth approving?" Senator Hawkins, a 65-year-old man with completely white hair and a face marked by decades of Washington politics, listened patiently as LeBron and Jordan explained their mission to pressure the FDA to accelerate the approval process for the experimental treatment that had saved Gloria. His hands were clasped on the desk as he absorbed the devastating statistics the two athletes had compiled through months of research. More than 15,000 Americans died annually from rare cardiomyopathy, most of them never gaining access to experimental treatments that could save them simply because they lacked the financial resources or necessary connections to access specialized clinics in Europe. Jordan had used his influence to arrange meetings with other senators, congressmen, and regulatory agency officials, but each encounter had resulted in evasive answers, vague promises of future consideration, and bureaucratic explanations about protocols that seemed designed more to protect institutions than to save human lives. Senator Hawkins finally leaned forward, his expression serious but not entirely hopeless, and began to explain the political realities that would make their mission extremely challenging, but not impossible. "Gentlemen, I admire your passion and understand the urgency of the situation. My own sister died of a similar heart condition 5 years ago. But you need to understand that the FDA approval process exists for good reasons. Accelerating treatments can save lives, but it can also put them at risk." In the following months, LeBron and Jordan found themselves navigating the labyrinthine corridors of American political power, discovering that not even all the fame and influence in the world could easily overcome the bureaucratic machine that protected the healthcare system's status quo. Jordan had mobilized an impressive network of former Chicago Bulls teammates, contacting Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Phil Jackson, and Steve Kerr, asking each to use their own connections and influence to pressure politicians in their home states and social circles. Scottie Pippen had organized fundraising dinners in Chicago, where influential businessmen and local politicians were educated on the importance of the experimental treatment, while Dennis Rodman, surprisingly, had used his eccentric yet powerful connections in the entertainment world to draw media attention to the cause. Phil Jackson had written compelling articles in national newspapers about the need for reform in the drug approval system, using his reputation as a strategist to articulate logical and compassionate arguments that resonated with readers across the country. Steve Kerr had contacted other NBA coaches and former players, creating a network of athletes who began to speak publicly about the importance of making experimental treatments more accessible to ordinary American families. Phil, we need you to use your platform to write about this. People respect your voice, and this cause needs all the visibility it can get. Steve, you know politicians in Golden State? We need support in California if we want this to have any chance in Congress. Despite the coordinated efforts and the media attention they managed to generate, LeBron and Jordan faced a series of humiliating rejections and closed doors that tested their determination and forced them to confront the limits of their influence in a political system that operated according to rules completely different from those governing the sports world. Meetings that had been scheduled with great enthusiasm were canceled at the last minute by aides offering transparent excuses about scheduling conflicts, while FDA officials responded to their proposals with standardized letters filled with technical jargon that effectively said no without truly committing to a definitive answer. During one particularly frustrating meeting with a congressional subcommittee responsible for oversight of health agencies, LeBron and Jordan were informed that any change to drug approval protocol would require years of additional study, extensive public hearings, and approval through multiple layers of bureaucracy that seemed designed more to avoid political responsibility than to facilitate improvements in the system. Jordan, who had faced some of the highest pressure moments of his sports career with unwavering calm, found himself struggling to maintain composure in front of politicians who seemed more concerned with protecting their own careers than with the urgency of saving human lives. Congressman, with all due respect, while you are debating protocols and procedures, real people are dying from conditions that could be treated. How many more families will have to lose loved ones because the system is too slow to adapt to medical advances that have already been proven effective? During the most challenging moments of their campaign, when it seemed like every door was closing and all hope was fading, LeBron and Jordan found strength in the memory of Gloria and the determination she had shown during her 8 months of silent struggle against her heart condition. They remembered how she had faced every medical appointment, every frightening test, every painful night with a courage that had inspired not only her recovery, but also the mission that now consumed their lives. LeBron began publicly sharing his mother's full story, including the months she had hidden her illness to protect him, transforming his personal narrative into a powerful symbol of the need for change in the American healthcare system. Jordan complemented these stories with his own reflections on social responsibility and the duty to use privilege and influence to benefit people who hadn't had the same opportunities and resources. Together, they began appearing on national television shows, giving interviews to medical journals and newspapers, and speaking at conferences where they could educate the public about the reality faced by families battling rare diseases without access to treatments that could save them. My mother taught me that when you get a second chance at life, you use that chance to help others have their own second chances. Michael and I were lucky to have the resources to save my mom, but luck shouldn't determine who lives and who dies in this country. The public pressure they managed to generate through their sustained campaign gradually began to create cracks in the political resistance they had encountered during the first months of their efforts. Investigative articles in national newspapers began exposing the inconsistencies and inefficiencies in the FDA's approval process, highlighting specific cases of patients who had died while waiting for access to treatments already available in other countries. Patient advocacy groups that had been fighting alone for years began to organize around the leadership that LeBron and Jordan provided, creating a broader and more powerful coalition of voices demanding regulatory reform. Families who had lost loved ones to rare heart diseases began sharing their own stories, creating a chorus of personal experiences that humanized the statistics and made it impossible for politicians to completely ignore the urgency of the situation. Jordan had learned through his business experience that systemic change often requires not just top-down pressure, but also grassroots mobilization that makes it politically costly for elected officials to ignore a cause. And he applied that strategy to their campaign for regulatory reform. LeBron, we're starting to see real changes in public opinion. People are finally understanding this isn't just about us or your mom. It's about a system that needs to be reformed so that all Americans have access to the best treatments available, regardless of their wealth or connections. The momentum they built over months of tireless work culminated in a series of public congressional hearings where LeBron and Jordan were invited to testify about their experiences and present evidence on the need to accelerate the approval process for proven experimental treatments. The hearing room was packed with affected families, medical professionals, pharmaceutical industry representatives, and journalists from national outlets who had been covering their campaign from the start. LeBron had prepared a detailed testimony combining his mother's personal story with rigorous medical research and specific proposals for regulatory reform, while Jordan presented economic analyses showing how speeding up approvals for effective treatments could actually save money for the healthcare system in the long run by reducing the costs of prolonged palliative care. The atmosphere in the room was charged with emotion and expectation, with senators and congressmen clearly aware that they were participating in a moment that could define their own political careers, depending on how they responded to the proposals presented. During the break between sessions, LeBron and Jordan were approached by dozens of families who had traveled from across the country to witness the process, each carrying photographs and stories of loved ones who could have been saved if they had had access to the same resources Gloria had received. Senators and congressmen, you have the opportunity to vote for legislation that will save thousands of American lives in the coming years. This isn't a partisan or ideological issue. It's a matter of life and death for real families in your own districts and states. Despite the significant progress they had managed to generate, the final vote in Congress on the legislation proposing reforms to the FDA approval process remained uncertain until the last moment. Some congressmen had publicly expressed support for the cause, but others remained concerned about potential unintended consequences of accelerating medical approvals, citing historical examples of drugs that had caused harm when released prematurely. The pharmaceutical industry had mobilized its own lobbyists to argue that changes made too quickly could compromise patient safety and create dangerous precedents for future approvals, creating a powerful counterpressure that threatened to neutralize all the efforts LeBron and Jordan had made over the preceding months. On the night before the final vote, they received calls from political aides in Washington informing them that the vote was extremely close, with just a few votes making the difference between the legislation passing or failing. Jordan spent the entire night contacting every political connection he had cultivated over decades of public life, making personal appeals to anyone who could influence undecided votes, while LeBron used his social media platforms to mobilize fans across the country to contact their elected representatives in the final hours before the vote. This vote will determine whether our months-long campaign resulted in real change or if it was all just an exercise in frustration. No matter what happens tomorrow, we know we did everything in our power to honor the second chance my mom received. On the morning of the final vote, LeBron and Jordan received a call that made their hearts race with a mix of renewed hope and overwhelming anxiety. The voice on the other end of the line belonged to a senior congressional aide who had been working with them for weeks, and his words carried both urgency and uncertainty. The final vote will be today at 4 p.m. You have one last chance to convince the undecided congressmen. Some of them are willing to meet with you this morning, but after that, there's nothing more you can do. LeBron and Jordan looked at each other across the breakfast table where they were sitting, recognizing that this was the culminating moment of all the months of work, frustration, hope, and determination they had invested in their mission. Jordan slowly stood up, his expression carrying the same focused intensity that had defined his most crucial moments on the basketball court, and looked directly into LeBron's eyes with a determination that seemed to capture decades of experience facing impossible pressure. The next hours would determine whether all their effort had been enough to overcome the inertia of a political system that resisted change, or if they would have to accept that even the best intentions and most dedicated efforts sometimes aren't enough to beat the bureaucratic machine. It's now or never, LeBron. We need a miracle, but we've already seen a miracle happen with your mom. Let's go to the Capitol and give everything we have left. If we don't succeed today, at least we'll know we fought to the very end. The Gloria James Cardiac Treatment Center stood majestically in the heart of Akron, Ohio, its glass and steel walls reflecting the golden light of the sunset as hundreds of people gathered for the inauguration ceremony that would mark the culmination of 6 months of intense work since the historic passage of the legislation in Congress. The five-story building had been constructed with the most advanced medical technology available, equipped with experimental surgical rooms identical to those Dr. Weber had used in Germany, cardiac research laboratories, and accommodations for families traveling long distances to receive treatment. LeBron James stood at the improvised podium in front of the main entrance, looking out at the crowd that included not only local Akron residents, but also families from across the country who had traveled specifically to witness the opening of a facility that could save their loved ones' lives. Michael Jordan stood by his side, along with Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Phil Jackson, and Steve Kerr, all wearing formal suits but carrying smiles that reflected the profound satisfaction of men who had used their influence for something infinitely more important than sports achievements. The golden plaque beside the main entrance gleamed under the lights of television cameras, with elegant letters proclaiming, "Gloria James Cardiac Treatment Center, where hope meets healing," a message that perfectly captured the mission that had consumed their lives over the past months. Looking at this building, it's hard to believe it all started with a desperate phone call at 3 in the morning. "Michael, without you, my mom would have died, and none of these other families would have this opportunity. This center exists because you answered the phone that night." Gloria James, radiant with health and wearing an elegant blue dress that perfectly matched her vibrant and renewed personality, cut the ceremonial ribbon with golden scissors as photographers captured the historic moment for newspapers and magazines across the country. Her recovery had been so complete that it was hard to believe that just 8 months earlier, she had been at death's door, connected to life support machines as doctors debated whether she would survive the night. Now she moved with the energy of a woman 20 years younger, her eyes shining with a vitality that seemed to radiate hope to everyone around her. During the opening ceremony, Gloria had insisted on personally meeting every family present, hugging children who would soon receive experimental treatments, talking with parents who had spent sleepless nights worrying about their children's futures, and offering words of encouragement based on her own experience of facing the impossible and emerging victorious. LeBron watched his mother interacting with the other families, feeling a mixture of immense pride and deep gratitude for having made the right decision in that terrifying moment at the hospital when he had authorized the experimental procedure that not only saved her life, but also opened doors for others to have access to the same hope. "Mom, seeing you like this, healthy and strong, validated every moment of anguish we went through during that impossible decision. You didn't just survive to be here today. You became the inspiration for hundreds of other families to have their own second chances." Despite the extraordinary success they had achieved with the passing of the legislation and the construction of the medical center, LeBron and Jordan still faced one final significant obstacle: raising permanent funds to ensure the center could operate indefinitely without relying on sporadic donations or uncertain government funding. The cost of maintaining a state-of-the-art medical facility equipped with experimental technology and specialized staff was astronomically high. They needed to create an endowment that would generate enough revenue to cover all operational expenses, while offering completely free treatments for families with no financial resources. It was during a financial planning meeting that Jordan suggested an idea that initially seemed impossible, but gradually revealed itself as the perfect solution to their fundraising challenges: organizing a special basketball game called Legends for Hearts, where he would return to the court one last time to play alongside LeBron, bringing together two generations of basketball greatness for a unified cause. The proposal was simultaneously exciting and terrifying for Jordan, who hadn't played competitively in over 2 decades, but recognized that this could be the most powerful fundraising event ever organized in American sports history. "LeBron, I know it sounds crazy, but imagine the impact of having you, me, and all our former teammates playing together for this cause. It would be the last game of my life, but also the most important. If we can sell out an arena and broadcast it, we can raise millions." The organization of the Legends for Hearts game became a massive collaborative project involving not only LeBron and Jordan, but also Scottie Pippen, Dennis Rodman, Phil Jackson, Steve Kerr, and dozens of other basketball legends who agreed to participate without hesitation when they learned about the cause behind the event. Scottie Pippen took responsibility for contacting players from the Bulls era, while LeBron mobilized contemporary NBA stars who had expressed interest in contributing. Surprisingly, Dennis Rodman became one of the most effective organizers, using his eccentric connections in the entertainment world to ensure that celebrities from outside basketball would also participate, turning the spectacle into a cultural celebration of philanthropy and second chances. Phil Jackson worked with television producers to secure national coverage of the game, while Steve Kerr coordinated logistical details with the arena chosen for the event. The national media had embraced the story enthusiastically, turning the game into one of the most anticipated sports events of the year, not because of the competition, but because of the humanitarian cause it represented and the unique opportunity to see Michael Jordan on the court once again. Phil, we need to make sure that all proceeds from the event go directly to the center's endowment. This can't be about us. It has to be entirely about the families. Steve, I want every ticket sold to include information about cardiomyopathy and how people can support medical research in their own communities. On the night of the Legends for Hearts game, Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse in Cleveland, the very same place where it had all started when LeBron received the call about Gloria's collapse, was completely sold out, with an audience that included not only basketball fans, but also medical professionals, families affected by heart disease, and political dignitaries who had supported the legislation passed months earlier. The atmosphere in the arena was unlike any basketball game anyone present had ever experienced. There was a palpable emotional energy that transcended sport and became a celebration of hope, second chances, and the power of human collaboration to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. LeBron, now 40 but still in impressive physical shape, had spent weeks training specifically for this game, not because he wanted to impress with his performance, but because he wanted to honor the seriousness of the cause they represented. Jordan, at 63, had worked with personal trainers to regain enough conditioning to play at least a few meaningful minutes, knowing that his presence on the court would be the most symbolic and emotionally powerful moment of the entire event. Television cameras captured every detail of the pregame preparations, from the players warming up to emotional interviews with families who had been directly benefited by the medical center. Jordan, I can't believe we're actually doing this. You playing basketball again at 63 for a cause that started with my mom. LeBron, some things in life are worth the risk of looking ridiculous. This cause is worth any embarrassment I might face if I can't keep up with you guys. The most emotional moment of the night came when Gloria James was invited to make the ceremonial tip-off, walking confidently to center court in stark contrast to the archival footage shown on the arena screens of just 8 months earlier, when she was unconscious in a hospital bed connected to life support machines. Wearing a special game jersey with her own name on the back, Gloria held the official basketball while LeBron and Jordan positioned themselves around her for the ceremonial jump ball, creating an image that would be reproduced in newspapers and social media worldwide as a symbol of triumph over adversity. When she tossed the ball into the air, the entire arena erupted in applause that lasted more than 5 minutes, with people openly crying as they celebrated not just the start of a basketball game, but the culmination of an extraordinary journey that had transformed personal tragedy into collective hope. Jordan and LeBron hugged at center court after the tip-off, a hug that communicated years of mutual respect, friendship forged through adversity, and a shared recognition that they had used their platforms for something infinitely more important than individual achievements. The tears in both men's eyes were visible even through television cameras, and sports commentators struggled to keep their own voices steady as they described a moment that transcended anything they had witnessed in decades covering professional sports. Gloria, this moment is yours. You turned your second chance into second chances for thousands of other people. Mom, when you toss this ball up, it's not just the start of a game. It's the symbol that miracles really happen when people come together. The game itself was a unique combination of sports nostalgia and humanitarian purpose, with Jordan showing flashes of his former brilliance despite his age, while LeBron adjusted his playing style to create opportunities for the older legends to shine in key moments. Dennis Rodman entertained the crowd with his usual eccentric personality, but also showed moments of genuine seriousness when he spoke during breaks about the importance of the cause they were supporting. Scottie Pippen and Phil Jackson worked together as if they were still on the 90s Bulls, creating plays that reminded everyone present why that team had been considered one of the greatest of all time. Steve Kerr sank several three-pointers that made the arena explode in nostalgia, while other former players contributed memorable moments that mixed athletic skill with emotional purpose. But the most significant moment came in the fourth quarter, when Jordan and LeBron worked together on a play that resulted in a spectacular basket, followed by another embrace at center court that symbolized the union of two different basketball eras around a cause that transcended generational rivalries or career comparisons. The television broadcast had broken viewership records, and online donations were pouring in real time from viewers around the world who had been inspired not just by the game, but by the story behind it. Michael, this play we just made together means more to me than any basket I've ever scored in my career. LeBron, playing alongside you today reminded me why I love this game. Not for the trophies, but for the moments that change lives. After the game, which raised over $50 million through ticket sales, broadcast rights, corporate sponsorships, and online donations, LeBron stepped to center court for a speech he had prepared for weeks, but that was charged with spontaneous emotion, reflecting the extraordinary journey that had led him to that moment. His voice echoed through the arena's sound system as he spoke about how true greatness in sports is not measured by championships, records, or individual accolades, but by the ability to use the platform that athletic success provides to positively impact other people's lives. He described how the experience of almost losing his mother had completely changed his perspective on what really matters in life, transforming him from an athlete focused on personal achievements into a passionate advocate for causes benefiting people who never had his opportunities and advantages. LeBron specifically thanked Michael Jordan for answering a desperate call at 3 a.m. and for being present during every difficult moment of the journey that followed, explaining how that friendship had become one of the most valuable parts of the entire experience. His message resonated throughout the arena and beyond, captured by cameras broadcasting his words to millions of people who had followed the story from the beginning and were now witnessing its triumphant conclusion. True greatness is not in the titles we win or the records we break. It's in using our platform to save lives and give hope to families. This medical center will keep operating long after we've all left this world, saving people we don't even know exist. That is real immortality. Jordan then approached the microphone for his own final remarks, his voice carrying decades of wisdom and a deep understanding of how sport can be transformed into something far greater than entertainment when directed toward noble purposes. He spoke about how true friendship is born not in moments of celebration and triumph, but in the hardest and most vulnerable times of life, when people show who they really are under extreme pressure and seemingly insurmountable adversity. Jordan described how his relationship with LeBron had evolved from professional respect to genuine friendship through the shared experiences of the most challenging months when they had together faced political bureaucracy, institutional resistance, and moments of doubt about whether their efforts would truly make a difference. He expressed gratitude for having had the opportunity to use his experience and influence for something that completely transcended his achievements on the basketball court, explaining how the campaign had given him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since retiring from professional sports. Jordan concluded his remarks by looking directly at Gloria in the stands, thanking her for raising a son who possessed not only extraordinary athletic talent, but also the compassion and determination necessary to transform personal tragedy into collective hope for thousands of other families. LeBron, true friendship is born in life's hardest moments, when you find out who's really willing to stand by your side. Gloria, thank you for raising a man who uses his greatness to lift others. That's the most important legacy anyone can leave. As the crowd began to disperse from the arena, television cameras captured a final sequence that would become iconic. Gloria James, smiling radiantly in the stands, surrounded by other families who had been touched by the mission of the medical center, followed by images of children being treated in the state-of-the-art facilities built with resources raised through their campaign. And finally, LeBron and Jordan walking together toward the exit of the arena, not as rivals from different basketball generations, but as brothers united by a cause that had transformed their lives and the lives of countless others. Their conversation as they walked was intimate and reflective. Two sports legends not discussing game strategies or professional accomplishments, but the deeper meaning of having used their platforms to create lasting change in the world. The arena lighting created dramatic silhouettes as they walked away, symbolizing the end of an extraordinary journey that had begun with despair and fear, passed through determination and struggle, and culminated in triumph and hope. The television commentators, many of whom had covered both players during their careers, struggled to find adequate words to describe what they had witnessed. Not just a charity basketball game, but the conclusion of one of the most inspiring stories in the history of American sports. Michael, when we walk out of here today, we're not just leaving an arena. We're leaving behind a legacy that will keep saving lives for generations. LeBron, this journey taught me that the most important moments in life happen when you least expect them. A phone call at 3 in the morning changed everything. The final narration echoed over the closing images, captured by the voice of one of the sport's most respected commentators who had followed the story from the beginning and now had the honor of providing the closing words for a saga that had touched millions around the world. Sometimes the greatest victories happen far from basketball courts, in operating rooms and hospital corridors, in political offices, in congressional hearings. And sometimes a desperate phone call at 3 in the morning can change not just 2 lives, but thousands, creating waves of hope that spread far beyond what anyone could have imagined when it all began. The words were accompanied by a final montage of images. Gloria James hugging patients at the medical center that bore her name, families receiving news that their loved ones would have access to life-saving treatments, LeBron and Jordan working together in political meetings, and finally the golden plaque at the entrance of the Gloria James Cardiac Treatment Center shining under the sunlight, a permanent monument to the power of hope, determination, and true friendship to overcome any obstacle and create lasting change in the world. This story proves that when people unite for a cause greater than themselves, there's no limit to what they can achieve. The Gloria James Cardiac Treatment Center will keep saving lives long after we're all gone, an eternal testament that miracles really do happen. 6 months after that memorable night at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse, LeBron James and Michael Jordan walked through the quiet corridors of the Gloria James Cardiac Treatment Center, looking through glass windows into rooms where doctors worked with surgical precision to save lives that once would have been condemned. The soft spring morning light filtered through the building's large windows, creating an atmosphere of serenity that contrasted with the intensity of the medical procedures happening on every floor. They had developed the habit of making these monthly visits together, not out of administrative obligation, but out of an emotional need to personally witness the impact of everything they had fought for during those challenging months of political campaigning and social mobilization. Michael, look at that girl in room 3. 2 weeks ago, doctors had given up on her, and today she's going home completely cured. LeBron, every time I come here, I remember why it was worth facing all those stubborn politicians in Washington. That particular morning, they were visiting to meet Marcus Thompson, a 12-year-old boy from Detroit who had become the 100th patient to successfully receive the experimental treatment. Marcus was sitting in his hospital bed, playing on a Nintendo Switch, completely unaware that he represented a historic milestone for the medical center that had saved his life. His parents, Robert and Angela Thompson, had traveled across 4 states with the family's entire savings to bring Marcus to Akron, not knowing if they would have enough money for treatment, only to find out that all procedures were completely free thanks to the endowment created through the Legends for Hearts game. LeBron knelt by Marcus's bed, talking about basketball and video games, while Jordan silently observed the interaction, recalling his own hospital visits as a child and how professional athletes had represented hope during difficult times. Marcus, when you grow up and become a doctor or an astronaut or whatever you want to be, remember that your second chance can help others get their own second chances. Mr. Jordan, thank you for saving our son. We had nowhere to go before we found this place. Gloria James appeared at the door of the room, now working as the official ambassador of the center, visiting families and offering the kind of emotional support that only someone who had gone through the same experience could provide. Her transformation from patient to advocate had been natural and powerful, and she had become the human face of everything the center represented. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give the world is to transform our pain into purpose to help others. This center will keep saving lives long after we're all gone, and that is true immortality. If the journey of Michael Jordan and LeBron James touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and check out the next inspiring story we've prepared for you. See you soon. And before you go, comment where you're watching from and tell me, what did you think about the ending of this story?